Yeah.
Good evening, councillors and members of the public, of whom we are slightly overwhelmed this evening. Can't imagine why. Right. The first item on the agenda is to receive and accept any apologies. The only apology we've had, not quite true, but there's one from Councillor Glenn. Councillor Sparks indicated that he may or may not be able to get here for personal reasons. So if he doesn't appear, we'll accept his apologies. Councillor Baker we've yet to hear from. Do we accept the apologies of Councillor Glenn and, if necessary, Councillor Sparks?
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is representations of interested parties. Have you had anybody who's actually indicated a specific wish to speak?
No.
We haven't had anybody who's indicated a specific wish to speak, but there are quite a large number of people from the public present. If anybody does wish to speak, we will hear from you briefly.
I've never been here before, so I don't know the procedure.
Right. It might be easier if you stand, simply
Yes.
because we're all going to be at the same level. Introduce yourself if you would, and then tell us what you want to.
When you say interested parties, does that mean you're part of the meeting or what?
Anybody who has an interest in anything on the agenda tonight may
Yes.
speak about anything that is on the agenda tonight.
Yes, I would. David Young, number 9 St Peters Road. It's with regard to the Cotterstock Road outline planning application.
Right.
Would you like me to say?
Yes, please.
I've read the report from Gladman's regarding the sniff test regarding to the sewage works, which is recorded as negligible, and that they've not had any complaints since 2003. That is totally inaccurate. In fact, I spoke to a neighbour who I know had since 1996 has lived in St Peters Road and has been complaining since then, right up till this last month, she phoned. She used to correspond by writing, but since then she was given, or at a certain point was given phone numbers that she could ring rather than writing into Anglian Water. That she has done. She can't be here because she's gone away on holiday. The correspondence in the early days from 2014 backwards was to Anglian Water, Phil Hope, who was the MP at the time, Rupert Reichel was involved, and East Northants Council Environmental Health was also involved in the smell issue. Which is also to say there isn't a problem there. You would have to ask, why would the Anglian Water fit what's called an odour suppression system, which automatically cuts in when there is a certain winds in a certain direction to cut out the smell to St Peters Road. And that's my real representations that I've got. Concerns that Gladman's are not totally accurate. There is other things as well. Also, which I think should be borne in mind, is the transport. Since the schools have amalgamated, St Peters Road is now quite heavily populated with vehicles and members of the families walking to and from school on a regular twice a day. That road gets quite busy now, St Peters Road, especially the top end. But also noted on Sunday, which I never thought about before, we have got now into the rugby season, and the bottom of St Peters Road, you cannot move. I doubt even if a fire engine or a large vehicle gets along. If you've got another 130 houses, that will only add to the... Now, I would never propose to restrict the children down, because we want to encourage children to go and enjoy sport. But certainly another 130 houses exiting onto St Peters Road would cause us problems. That, I think, is just that way, is that I come tonight to express my... there is other points within the plan, etc. But I think other people could say anything about that.
Thank you very much for that. So,
Julian Moss Russell, I declare an interest in the Bettyfield Estates, I should probably know. one of the things that I've heard here at previous meetings was the great fear of this committee that there would be planning applications submitted to East North Hants while the neighbourhood plan was being developed and things. And the presumption is with a planning application that it will be addressed within 13 weeks. However, we've been able to supply the committee here with information showing from the Country Landowners Association and the NFU statutory documents that if the neighbourhood plan is nearly there, which it is, it's been accepted to go before the examiner, and so it is. Hopefully he will examine it, hopefully find it sound, and then it should be incorporated in the local plan. That under those circumstances, should planning applications not be accepted or determined by East North Hants. So that is what I'm asking you to do, to make absolutely sure, with the full weight of this committee and the chairman of the Planning Management Committee, to make absolutely sure that these two applications are not determined prior to the neighbourhood plan being examined, because that would completely muck up what this committee and others have been doing for the last X number of years. If 300 houses were allocated to two of these sites, then it would completely muck up anything else. Because Oundle itself, I'm sure, would say 300 houses, there they are, we don't want any more.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take, yeah, that was you first and you next.
Okay. So my name is William Leo, excuse me, and I live at 6 Sutton Road on the estate next to the St Christopher's Drive site. First thing I wanted to do was to thank the council for securing the deferment on the local plan, because I think that was a great step forward and a testament to the work that was done by the council over the years. Considering what's in the neighbourhood plan and the importance of that, then with these two planning applications that have come forward, and in particular St Christopher's Drive, then looked closely at it, all of the issues that were there and impacted on the scoring of the St Christopher's Drive site in the mix of sites in the neighbourhood plan and led it to be excluded. Many of them are still there and are not adequately addressed in the planning application, having read hundreds of pages of it. Okay, access, surface flooding, angling water connections, etc. So I think there is still a fight to be fought to do this properly. The second point I wanted to make was that planning application that has come in, the fact that it addresses the St Christopher's Drive site, I would certainly be raising my objections to it and working to object to it, and I would ask the town council to formally object to it as well. The very fact that it isn't in the neighbourhood plan anymore, you know, I think it's inevitable that you need to object to it. And the second thing is, the behaviour from Persimmon is really clear. It says, we don't support your neighbourhood plan, you know, we don't respect it, and we're going to bypass it. And that's what they're aiming to do, and I think it's really important, as the previous speaker said, to make sure that doesn't happen, because the neighbourhood plan is what the people voted for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So,
My name is Rex Lilly. I live in Forest School View, which is off Red Kite Drive, and we've heard that there's a planning application being put in for houses to be built on the field, which is adjacent to Red Kite. Trying to find out a bit more information about it, if possible.
you'll probably hear quite a bit this evening.
Thank you.
There being no other representations, can we move on to any declarations of interest. Firstly, any disclosable pecuniary interests? Any other interests?
So I declare I'm interested in St Christopher's Drive.
I think we ought to say we're all interested in the Underhill Rugby Club application.
Yes, indeed we are.
I'm a resident of St Peter's Road.
No. Yes.
Right, minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 6th of August, and present were myself, Councillor Sue Oakes, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Neville Oakes, Councillor Glenn and Councillor Chesser. Anybody who was there like to propose those as an accurate record? They have been circulated. Councillor Oakes N, Councillor Chesser. All those in favour? Thank you. Bear with me whilst I sign about 6 pages. Right, this brings us on to the various planning applications. We're going to deal with this marginally differently to how we've sometimes done it, in as much as I'm going to give you a bit of an overview before we start. Then Councillor Oakes will be showing us some.
Can I just get
slides.
you an intro to that, if you don't mind?
You can do an intro to my intro.
Absolutely. Planning applications. I thought I'd just put this up. Okay. The planning pyramid. We're in a funny old position. I think the first thing I'd like to say is to thank the residents for A, turning up and expressing their opinion. I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can because it's very, very complicated. So we start with that. It then moves down to the core spatial strategy. It then moves down to the Rural North and Oval Thrapston Plan, RATP. It then shifts down to the local plan, which East Northamptonshire has proposed. And then underneath it, it's us, basically. So all I wanted to do was just sort of set the scene that that's the issue that we have. We're wrestling with an awful lot of issues here. Over to you, David.
Right. Those of you who've looked at our agenda will have noticed that later in the agenda there is a review of the planning guidance document that we use as councillors within this committee to assist us in looking at planning applications. And it's up there for review. We said we would always review it when the neighbourhood plan reached a certain stage. The neighbourhood plan is now in Regulation 16 consultation, and that seemed to be an appropriate stage to review it. And at the point that I said put it on the agenda to review it, I had no knowledge of the fact that we were going to get not one but 2 strategic planning applications come before us on the same night. The original planning guidance document was actually prepared as long ago as 2013, and in a sense therefore makes rather interesting reading when one looks at the applications that are before us this evening. Let me actually read you this little bit out from the guidance document. And this came before this committee on the 5th of September 2013, almost exactly 6 years ago, at a time when I think we thought that our neighbourhood plan would probably have been all done and dusted probably within 18 months of that date. And what we said then was that pending the completion and adoption of the Oundle Neighbourhood Plan, any application for planning permission for residential development of a strategic site should be objected to on the grounds that A, granting permission is not necessary or appropriate given the adequate supply of land for housing development within Oundle in particular, but also within the district, and B, granting permission would be premature given the risks potentially posed to the development of the Oundle Neighbourhood Plan. Prescient or what? It may be 6 years on, but I'm not entirely sure that anything has realistically changed. The neighbourhood plan, as I just mentioned, has got to regulation 16 stage, and the next stage after that is submission to the examiner, and hopefully the next stage after that is a referendum. So the neighbourhood plan has a degree of status. And we're in an interesting position because Councillor Oakes has put up on the screen a little pyramid which shows on the pyramid, under the core spatial strategy, the current local plan, which, for better or for worse, is still the Rural North Oundle and Thrapston plan. And underneath that is the District Council's attempt to produce a new local plan. This new local plan was never intended to be simply restricted to the same geographic area as RNOTP. The new local plan was a district-wide local plan. And ENC thought that they were moving ahead quite well and produced a draft of their local plan and have ultimately, and I use the word ultimately advisedly, disclosed its content. I think it's probably fair to say that within the rest of East Northamptonshire it created barely a ripple. The people of Oundle, however, took a rather different view to what they were reading, and it became very apparent very quickly that this council objected to what we were seeing in the local plan as proposed, and what's more, so did the people of Oundle. We objected to it on a number of grounds, not least the fact that we felt that the premise on which the thing was designed was actually wrong in the first place. There were numerous errors within the way in which the sites had been assessed. ENC ultimately accepted that perhaps their plan wasn't quite as straight and sound as they thought it was. And off it went to a new set of consultants. Consultants had done very well out of this entire process. So this went off to a set of consultants who came back and, to paraphrase it, broadly speaking, said, yeah, you got it right. The sites that you've put in your new local plan, which were 3, are indeed the best 3 sites for development in Oundle. And those 3 sites are the Cotterstock Road St Peters Road site, the St Christopher's Road site, and a site off Stoke Doyle Road, effectively adjacent to the cemetery. Of those 3 sites, 1 is included in our neighbourhood plan, and the other 2 are not. It's fair to say that in an earlier iteration of the plan, both the St Christopher's Road site and the Cotterstock Road site were both included. In relation to the Cotterstock Road site, at one point it was thought that perhaps it might be suitable for very limited development. Limited meaning in that case around about 30 dwellings. You'll notice that the outline planning application is for 130 dwellings. In relation to the St Christopher's Road site, it was suggested that this might potentially be developed in 2 phases, phase 1 being 45 properties, phase 2, potentially another 45, but not within the planned period, which was to 2031. However, as we worked on the plan following the initial Regulation 14 consultation, it became very obvious that there were 2 sites that were in our original draft which didn't seem to command a great deal of support. Indeed, one of those 2 sites was quite clearly the one that people had the most concern about. And after a great deal of further work, the revised neighbourhood plan, the one that has in fact gone forward for Regulation 16 consultation, came out, and neither the Cotterstock Road, St Peters Road site, nor indeed the St Christopher's Road site was included. What has followed has been extremely predictable. Think about it from the developer's point of view. If the neighbourhood plan goes forward to the examiner and leaves the examiner heading towards a referendum, and it passes at the referendum, then the neighbourhood plan would become the default local plan for Oundle, and neither of these 2 sites would have been included, which would make it, I suspect, unlikely that either could be developed within the planned period to 2031. Quite clearly, neither of these landowners stroke developers wanted to run that risk. And frankly, as soon as the neighbourhood plan went off in that state, I regarded it as practically inevitable that we would see applications in relation to these 2 sites. And neither of them, in a sense, have disappointed me, because here they both are. It may be worth also adding that although the consultants engaged by ENC to review their original draft plan came back and said essentially, yeah, you're all right, those 3 sites are okay. And although those 3 sites were supported by the planning department of the NC, when the matter came before councillors of the NC, they took a rather more robust approach and in essence said no. And in practical terms seem to have suggested that if the Oundle neighbourhood plan goes through with its sites, then effectively the position for the local plan will be that it will follow the neighbourhood plan in terms of housing development allocation. That would mean that the local plan would not include either of these sites either. Small wonder then that both of these developers have decided that their best chance of getting somewhere is to put in for outline planning permission now, and doubtless seek to argue that these sites are included, or at least were included, in the iteration of the draft local plan, part 2, and that the neighbourhood plan, not having even yet reached the examiner, should be wholly disregarded. That's bound to be their position. In relation to the Cotterstock Road site, they will doubtless pray in aid one other thing, and that is that in RNOTP it indicated 2 possible sites for future residential development beyond the planned period, but in Oundle. I might qualify that in a minute. One of those 2 sites was the Cotterstock Road, St Peters Road site. The other is the Stoke Doyle site. Interestingly enough, in RNOTP, it suggested that the Cotterstock Road, St Peters Road site could take 200 dwellings. So not the 130 that have come forward here, but 200 dwellings. And in relation to the site of Stoke Doyle Road, again it suggested an appreciably higher number than is either included in the neighbourhood plan or, for that matter, the local plan part 2 as far as it got. Now, it was identified as a possible site. That doesn't mean to say that it follows as night follows day, that if it comes forward it should automatically be granted. But I dare say the developer will make great play of it. One odd feature of it is that the site included in RNOTP is split between 2 parishes, because part of the development site is in the parish of Oundle and part of that site is in the parish of Glapthorne. Unlike Oundle, Glapthorne has already got an adopted neighbourhood plan. In the Glapthorne neighbourhood plan, the site that is part of this greater development was considered and rejected and is not allocated for residential development. So therein lies, if you like, some background. It's fair to say that if one looks at the planning guidance document, again, I stress, quite an old document, there are 1 or 2 other things in there that might be said to apply. In relation, for example, to the St Christopher's Drive site, it was suggested that if any site in that area, which, if you like, was off St Christopher's Drive, off Dashton Road, off Herne Road, were to come forward for residential development, then this council felt that it would have to be accompanied by an access and egress from the A605 bypass. That's, if you like, the current default position of this council. It's included in that document, it's never been changed, that's our position. It would be extremely expensive for any developer to install that kind of infrastructure, and they would have to do battle with the Highways Authority, no doubt. In relation to the other site, there are 2 or 3 points made. One of them concerns the water treatment plant, which has already been referred to by a parishioner this evening, and not building closer to it. So there are some things within that document which may assist us, and we've heard already 1 or 2 representations from parishioners mentioning other things. Now, I'm pretty certain that every councillor sitting around this table may have a view. But may I just close this section by saying, almost repeating what somebody has already said from the floor. And it's simply this. If either of these applications were to be granted outline planning permission, it would drive a coach and horses straight through the neighbourhood plan that this council has spent so long trying to put together. It may also be worth observing that in terms of development up to 2021, just as we have had to consider in the period of development to 2031, it's a numbers game. And the numbers game to 2021 was dictated by the previous core spatial strategy, and the numbers game to 2031 is, in effect, ruled by the current core spatial strategy. If 130 houses were to emerge on the St Peter's Road, Cotterstoke Road site, and 65 houses were to arrive on the St Christopher's Drive site, and I don't even mention the other 65 units, that is 195 dwellings, and it would be quite clear that we would have substantially exceeded the original target figure, if I can call it that, for the development period to 2021, if they happen. I think that's probably as far as I should go in terms of just opening it up. I'm almost looking at Councillor Peel first because he's done an awful lot of work in relation to the neighbourhood plan. So I rather suspect that he might like to kick off with his thoughts.
Well, I mean, obviously, we've got the two planning applications put in now to ENC. As I understand it, they don't go to the ENC Planning Committee until October, because that's the first day we've got to be able to go there, which actually gives us quite a lot of breathing space. I would also say that we are actually now, the neighbourhood plan is actually being submitted to the examiner week commencing the 15th of September. Excellent. So that will make a difference as well. One can never guarantee that the examiner won't throw it out. He might make major adjustments. But I think in our comments to the ENC in regard to the neighbourhood plan, we have clearly demonstrated that the RNOTP is no longer in any sense correct for Arundel anymore. There have been so many alterations. The school, for instance, now only one school, so therefore it's a much bigger school rather than the sort of three-tier we had. They didn't mention the fact that we've got a massive village being built in Bennefield either. In fact, I don't even think the A605 was mentioned at the time. So we actually have a very large area that we can actually challenge the RNOTP in their findings and in their assumptions for the Cottesloe Road. We'd also, in the Cottesloe Road report on 818, which is the section you're talking about, where it does mention further development on Cottesloe Road, it also mentions that all those properties should be completely eco-friendly and self-sustainable wherever possible. And they should also fit in with a structural look that would be satisfactory to Arundel. At the moment, from what the planners have done, or planners have done, those houses are just normal, sort of local little boxes sitting on a hillside. They've not addressed the look of the estate at all. They've just banged 130 houses on there. So I think we have a very good case, and with the work we've got from Mr. Julian there, and all his work he's got from the farmers, we should have a very good case to put towards the ENC on that. Within regard to St Christopher's Drive, firstly they put in planning for 90 houses, then it went up to 100, now it's gone to 130 because they're now putting a nursing home on site, which was never anticipated in the neighbourhood plan or indeed the local plan at the time. It's not in the local plan for the nursing home, it's not in, it was never brought up until this latest planning application thing. There is also, as all the members, all the parishes have said about St Christopher's Drive, it is almost impossible to get any type of emergency vehicle down to the new site that they went. It's almost impossible to get to St Christopher's Drive, no matter any other new site. So we have a very strong case to argue about that site. Nobody thinks it's going to be easy. We've got a lot more work to do, and I think with the new people we've got on the committee now for the working party, I'm talking about Ian and William in the back here, we have a very, very strong case to argue both at the ENC Planning Committee when it comes to the ENC Planning Committee, and also for the next meeting of the ENC plan in regard to Arundel. I think it's on the 30th of April, 30th of September this year, which obviously we'll all be going to speak about that as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's still a lot of hard work. There is an article that actually Ian brought up, which I think was smashing. It's in regard to a a site that Gladman's were going for in, is it Getting, which they lost. Now the reason, a large support for, a large reason for that rejection was actually the Corby Council. They actually got behind Gretton and supported their objections, and Gladman's lost their appeal for planning in Gretton. I believe that given the support we have in Arundel, and if we can continue to gather support from ENC councillors, not necessarily the planning department, but ENC councillors, we would be able to almost stop Gladman's in their tracks as well. I honestly believe that given the support we're getting now and the future support we're going to get, we will get the neighbourhood plan through, and we'll also get the referendum on the right side of it before any of these sites come into fruition in any way.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next? Okay, I'll allow Councillor Stern from ENC to speak.
Just a small point, really. But one of the things relating to the sites that we've got in the neighbourhood plan is there are some town assets involved that the developers have given to us as part of the original neighbourhood plan negotiated. Those sites are not in the district plan. Those assets are not catered for in the district plan. I mention it now because one of those sites, Julian's land, he was providing part of the cycle track and also the festival site, or whatever you'd like to call it, as part of what we're doing in terms of house building. If we don't have the neighbourhood plan, for instance, that won't go through because the district plan doesn't have it in. And that cycle track, along with the other parts of the cycle track with the developers around Handel, will have to go backwards. I've just been stymied and just stopped until all this gets sorted. But there's now money around to build a cycle track. Definitely got some spare money, so we've got to get something in soon, but we're stuck. Just got to get an annual plan through. Haven't we, Julian?
Absolutely, yes.
Right, perhaps it would be better if we had councillors speaking. Or is everybody just of this exactly the same mind?
Yes, I thought you explained it really well.
I do. I think that's...
I'm happy to move on.
I think that was succinct.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for the residents who've spoken. What I've done is to try and keep this very simple because there's an awful lot of documents on all of these applications. But I'm quite happy now to just go through each individual one that sits on the agenda.
That's great.
In a very, very simple way. There's an awful lot of paperwork.
I think, if I remember rightly, there are 21 documents on the Cotterstock Road side and 47 documents on the...
Of which one of them has got 57 pages in it.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention that. It does take an awful lot of reading.
But I'm trying to do this.
Can I suggest that we just take each of those two sites in turn?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a couple of other points I'd like to bring up, and then we'll sort of see where we get to.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I just dealt with these and I looked at it from a very sort of strategic thing. In other words, you know, the sites themselves are not going into the detail of the design of bungalows and all the other stuff. Right. Here we go. Cotterstock Road. 130. This is up to 130, which is interesting. Observation. But just remember, this is an outline, you know, this is an outline planning permission request. Okay. So that's the site. I'm sure you all know where it is.
And it's fair to say that part of that site lies outside the parish of Arundel.
It certainly does. Okay. I guess I put a little... I just thought I'd put a little bit of information, because not everybody knows what SUS is. I always used to think they were just bubbles. And apparently, they're technical bits and pieces to do with drainage. But I thought I'd add that because some people may not know what SUS are. Are we okay with that? Next. Okay, the site plan that's proposed is there, and you can see it. Now, what's interesting is that you can see an access into it, but one of the things that's significantly absent from the application is the positioning of the school and the positioning of an application, which I'll come on to, of some care homes. I always want to buy up a satellite picture just so you can get a sort of feeling for it, and now you can see where the school is, and you can see where the land is, and you can also see where the sewage treatment plant is. I'm very interested about the observations made about the sniffer test. I'm afraid I'm no expert on that, but I get a general drift. Okay on that?
If I may suggest that the planning law says no building within 400 yards of the corridor sanitaire, which is a nice way of putting it.
Okay.
400 yards.
I'll put this up here, lest we not forget. Demolition of 7-bedroom dwelling, we know that the house that was burnt down, and erection of the care home. And there it is, and that's right up there as well. Comstock Road could become a city. Right. Okay. The case I was to report on that one was the planning permission for the care home was refused, and that is still the case as far as I'm aware.
There's a new application in.
Yeah, I was going to.
Which I think.
I know that. I know that. But what they've done effectively is reduce the number and had a look at the parking issue as well. But I can't go into that because I haven't got the formal stuff yet. Okay. Next. Is that all right for everybody on that one? I've just kept it as general as I possibly could. I can't say much more.
Keep going. It's all right, I'm digging in.
God, it's nothing like marriage. Right, here we go. Okay. Now, I dealt with this originally when Seven put in an application for 95 homes on this land. This was a while ago. And that where it is, I think we probably know where it is. Running right down to the A605. But the original application was for 95 dwellings, but that meant that they had to have 40% of it as affordable housing. Now what's happened now is there's been a bit of fiddling about, can we call it, which means that we're now going to put a care home in there, which, now, I'm sorry about this, but please read it. If you can read it, I hope you can. If you can't read it, just give me your email address and I'll send it to you. But fundamentally, do you want me to, I'll tell you what, I'll read it.
Can I just ask a question? Because you're talking about care home, but it's a very specific term, isn't it? Extra care facility.
It's an extra care facility.
But I thought you would know about. Do you
Yes.
want to tell us?
An extra care facility is like a care home, that's the word here, but you could buy the apartments, you can have land with it, you don't have to have the medical attention, because you wouldn't need it, but you can move out of a big house into a small one if that's what you want to do. And if there's a question of medical difficulties, then you go up the grade and you get some medical care, and in the end you get an awful lot. So it does mean buying your own house rather than moving into somebody else's home.
So it's another way of putting housing on the
Yes,
village type.
it will allow a lot of big houses to come on the market and maybe convert it to flats or something else afterwards. Wonderful.
And would they have to remain as extra care? I mean, if somebody sold, could they just become part
It's
of
part of the planning
housing stock or
application.
not?
They've got it passed for an extra care home, they would not be allowed to change that.
It would always have to be in
Without housing,
perpetuity.
Well, only insofar as anybody can put in a planning
Well, that's
application
what I'm
for a change
asking
of
the
use,
question.
but they'd have to get a change of use,
Yeah.
yes.
I think the point about this is that they're very much in favour of this application.
Who is?
ENC.
The ENC are in favour of this application. This is why we put it up. All right? That is effectively their position. They're in favour of it. I put 65 extra bed care facility. I put in
I
raised.
have to disagree with you there. I don't think they are in favour of it. Well, there's nothing, there's
That's
nothing
why-
mind's been made up.
Well, the housing strategy manager says they
She's in
are.
favour of it because she put the care home in.
Well,
That's just housing.
well, all I can say is I put up what is available on the website.
But it's not a care home, is it? We have
Not really.
it's just houses.
Well, no, it's a four-storey building.
Yep.
Oh, it's apartments, isn't
It's a
it?
four-storey building with apartments in it.
Can I just ask you a question? It is very, my interpretation is that it is very similar to Stronglands.
Yeah. Right.
Partly you can rent them, partly you can partly buy them. The apartments have kitchens, a lounge and so on. So it is very, very similar to Stronglands. It is not a care
That was a
home,
care home.
but it is for older people to downsize.
I can only put up
Yeah.
what's there without, you know. And I'm delighted that you make any comments about it.
I think one thing we would say is that whether this would get through the ENC councillors is totally different to the ENC planning department. We proved that at the last ENC meeting that we had, where the councillors voted against their own planners. And I do feel that we still have that very strong connection with the councillors against the ENC planners. I'm not saying that if obviously the neighbourhood plan doesn't get through, I think it will. I think we have no problems really with it. But this is only if the neighbourhood plan doesn't get through, then we have to fight this corner on a different stage.
You're probably right. The original application for 95 homes was turned down. Largely, I think, as a result of various people, you know, saying they didn't like the idea because of the density and various other bits and pieces, and permission was refused. This is a sort of a kind of a revamp, really.
I think it's fair to say that when that planning application came before ENC, it was refused by ENC in the 90s. It went on appeal, and the appeal was lost. And I'm sure Councillor Stern will correct me if I'm wrong, but largely the reason it was lost, and this was a little while ago, so it may not hold true, so true now, but the site was not allocated for housing development in RNOTP. And at the time at which this was being considered, there was a demonstrable 5-year land supply available within the district. And therefore, basically, it fell because they couldn't demonstrate that there was a reason, if you like, to go outside RNOTP. Now, we're in exactly the same position now, but RNOTP is that much longer in the tooth. It technically should have been reviewed, but it wasn't reviewed because, in fact, it was going to be replaced with the district plan I spoke about earlier. So quite how ultimately it will be viewed, both by ENC and subsequently if it goes on appeal by the appeal itself, remains to be seen. But you could argue that precisely the same reasons which led to refusal last time could lead to refusal this time, assuming that there is a 5-year land supply. I made some inquiries about that over the weekend and spoke with Councillor Vowles, whose response was, well, there may be, and I don't think I could go further than that. It's not clear-cut, shall we say, but I rather suspect the NC would want to argue that there is, if they possibly could, because otherwise it opens the floodgates not just in Oundle but anywhere within the district.
May I just add that the Inspector on Appeal said no and refused the appeal on the basis that the land was good land and shouldn't be built on and wasn't right for development anyway. Disregarding 5-year land supply and anything else that was going on around it, she said it shouldn't be built on because it's an area you can look at the town, people could look into town, and it's also an area that was agricultural and shouldn't be developed.
And if that applied to that site, how much more does it apply to the site of Cotterstock Road and St Peter's Road? For those of you who are familiar with that site, it is a severely sloping site that goes down to the meadows and adjoins the River Nene.
It does. This is the point. The articles that we've got from Benefield and Mike Sithell actually proves that point for Cotterstock Road. The fact that it shouldn't be built on because it's agricultural land and the look of the place as well. So I think we can actually defend both sides. I think that the one problem I have is that because we're challenging the RNOTP in regard to Cotterstock Road, we can then hardly not challenge the RNOTP for St Christopher's Drive. We can't then go and say, well, we think the RNOTP is correct.
Actually, I think you probably can, because you can, in a sense, you can distinguish. First of all, the Cotterstock Road site is not allocated for housing development in RNOTP.
No,
it is specifically flagged up for development beyond 2021 as a possibility and no more. What Councillor Stern says is interesting. Let me read you a little bit more from our planning guidance document of 2013. Any development proposed for Oundle should take into account the town's location in the Nene Valley and should therefore be sensitive to and have the effect of enhancing key views and vistas from the Nene Valley, especially of the church spire. And actually anybody who's read all of the documents in relation to the Cotterstock Road site will see how they promptly try and get in about half a dozen times how this won't impact upon the church spire view. I wonder where they got that from. Any development should be located and designed in such a way as to be sensitive to the town's landscape setting, retaining and enhancing the distinctive qualities of the landscape character area in which it would be situated or from which it would be viewed. We value the views of and into Oundle both by road and by the River Nene itself, and wish so far as is practical to preserve these views from residential or other development. If ever we wanted to pray and aid something, there it is from 6 years ago. I might, within that context, just read you another bit. Under general comments, we defer to Anglian Water as to the impact on the town's existing foul water drainage and sewerage disposal system of any residential development, but regard it as essential that any new development does not add to the nuisance from the existing sewage plant lying just outside the town's boundary. We would not approve of residential development being built closer to the sewage plant than the existing housing stock, unless the plant can be improved to ensure that smells no longer emanate from it. Surprising how much material you can find in that document that actually assists us now. And incidentally, for the gentleman who mentioned the rugby club, I took the step on Sunday of driving down there. There were 11 cars parked in the stretch of new road that borders the recreation ground, if you like, not the downhill bit, but the straight bit. And a total of 55 cars parked in St Peter's Road. St Peter's Road is congested at times, at the best of times, because there are quite a number of properties in what I'm going to call the sort of top end of it, i.e. away from the slope, which don't actually have any on-site car parking. So car parking is instantly pushed onto the roadway and results in a sort of slalom course, because you certainly can't get two cars past when there are parked cars about. And on Sunday it was particularly marked because of all the additional cars that were there for the rugby, and that's not a one-off. That is a very regular occurrence. I know it's a regular occurrence because I used to live in St Peter's Road about 4 years ago, for about 30 years, and that has always been an issue, just as I have to say the gentleman's quite right. So at times are the smells from the sewage plant. It's not all the time, but at times it is very, very noticeable. Does anybody on this council actually support the idea of outline planning permission for either of these developments? Can I just establish that? Don't all speak at once.
No.
If I were to call a vote and ask for each site individually, whether or not on that basis people object to it, can I first of all ask whether people object to the site on Cotterstock Road? Please indicate by raising your hand if you do. That is unanimous. If you object to the building on the St Christopher's Road site, will you do the same thing? That is also unanimous. I will ensure that you have a very detailed response. I feel that there is a need for a certain kitchen sink approach. There's all sorts of issues that have been raised tonight, and I will make sure that you have a suitable document to use as our response document. For those of you who came this evening for that one matter, and I know one councillor at least has told me he has to leave, I might just give us 5 minutes to allow people to move before we move on and look at one or two other planning applications.
Before we go,
sorry, the Mayor wants a quick word.
Time is pressing on this particular issue because the submission for written responses, I believe, is the 15th of this month, 2 weeks away.
For Scotterstock,
12th, so less than 2 weeks. There's a fair amount of work, as you just described there, to do that, so we're giving the allocate something to do it.
Who said that I wasn't capable of generating something quickly? I wonder how that happened.
Well, I was doing the main usually then.
Yeah.
So I do know, you know...
It may be that councillors individually want to make their own representations over and above those that will come from the council itself.
Yeah. So what would you like to do, though? Would you like people to put in a proposal to yourself, or are you thinking you're going to write it? Because you are the more...
I took the precaution of assuming what might well happen tonight, and I think I am 99% correct.
Well done.
I don't think there's anything that I've put in that document that wouldn't actually have raised any issues from any councillor. I could read it, but it is, as you will see, 2.5 pages.
Do you want me to circulate it tomorrow to everybody?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of the work that Ian and William have done already on the two sites. Yeah, and I wonder whether we're going to incorporate that in the response.
Okay, Lisa will circulate it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there.
We've certainly heard enough ammunition to fire from lots of different directions. It would be wise of us, I think, to take your document, which I already thank you for, and make sure that everything's collated into it, so we have as much as possible. It might be giving the game away, but it's all precious stuff.
At this point, as I said earlier, I think we have to throw the kitchen sink at it. It's do or die now, isn't it? If they get what they want, we do not get what we want. It is as simple as that.
From one of these, the extra care facility in lieu of 40% of affordable housing, it seems to me like developer speak for, well, actually we don't really care about that part of it, we just want to maximise profit. So it's, which well, for most of us probably goes without saying, but it's very important that we have affordable housing, because Arundel, for all its glory, and I am a very strong proponent that it is the jewel in the crown, and it will be spoiled irrevocably, as other towns have been, if it is overdeveloped, and the classic centre of it will be destroyed. But we still are a rural community, and we still have people on very low incomes living here that are not able to stay here, that cannot stay here. And those things we risk. If we have to remember that. I think it's important as a council that we remember that, because we're not supporting the community effectively if we don't remember that, and that should be something we should push hard for as well, because that's just.
Well, I think the way we phrase the response to these two sites is quite critical, because neither site is in our plan for what the 2031 vision of Arundel. You know, but at the same time, if we phrase it in such ways that this is why we selected these sites, it works particularly well. And take the extra care one. The extra care one has actually worked to the advantage of the developers on that site because of the traffic volume. If he put the other 40 houses in there, then he would have an excess of houses. So he's actually, in his words, has allocated no cars to the residents of that facility. He's allocated one parking space for 3 apartments. So this is how he has tactically mixed.
But as you say, that seems crucial. That sort of information is put into our letter, into our response, because there's lots of things that have been, as in the Gladman document, all is just airbrushed away. All the problems. I mean, in the Gladman thing, there's a water pumping station about 5 feet from your front door. Well, that is no one's bothered to mention that. So there's a sewage work and the pumping station. It's getting worse and worse and worse. So there is massive ammunition.
So we've got a relatively short time to get something for you to vet and ensure that you're happy to put your name to it.
There may be a practical difficulty in as much as I get on an airplane tomorrow. And I may or may not find that I've got an internet connection which will enable me to stay in touch, which is one of the reasons why I took the precaution of putting something together in advance as best I could. But I'll see if I can link in. But my idea is that that will serve as a start point. It may well be that we need to expand on certain things. And I mean, certainly what Councillor Humphreys has just said might very well need to go in part into the part that deals with St Christopher's Drive.
Can I just ask again about Red Kite Drive? The land there. Nothing was mentioned about the land adjacent to it.
We haven't got there yet.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Small.
Okay, sorry.
If I may just suggest, David, there's a lot more things against these sites which haven't been mentioned tonight. I started to prepare a list of bullet points for what we do and what I will personally do from the gallery, because I won't chair these 2 applications because I've been too deeply involved in them. But I'll promote them from the gallery. And there are things like on the Ashton site, they have to have a bus. They are committed by law to putting a bus for every 200 people. You can't get a bus in there, I suspect, to start with. And if you did, you could have bus stops. And that will make it very difficult. Also, there's a planning term whereby for every 200 houses, there has to be no more than that off one road. From a point of view of cars, traffic, large vehicles. And on that road, starting from the roundabout, there's about 300 now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key problems with St Christopher's Drive is the fact that it's single access. I mean, the one thing that you could say for St Peter's Road is it proposes two access, albeit one of them would come out on Cotterstock Road, close to a bend and close to a school, but apart from that.
But there has to be an emergency vehicle access and egress as well.
Yeah.
And over 200 you can't really do it. Also, they were told that they've got to have some sort of mitigation for the wildlife disappearing. There's apparently some very, very, very rare moths on that site.
If there aren't, there soon will be.
They've got to have some mitigation for the greenfield containment work. So there's at least a dozen things like that which we will put at the council. But they're important things. If I do finish the note of the bullet points of the bits and pieces that came out for both sides, I'll drop it in.
Please.
Could you send a copy to William and Leon?
Yeah.
Yeah, so because if theirs is reflecting what you already said, then that's close to it.
Sure.
I can ask a question. The two sites have been submitted to East Northants. Have you determined what East Northants, the permanent officers, are going to be recommending? Are they going to run through the process, or are they going to say, hey, these we should not be looking at these sites until the neighbourhood plan has gone through its motions? It's within their power to do that, but we know East Northants.
We would certainly want them to defer. After all, if I go back to that 2013 document, that was part of what we were saying then. It's far more true now. I can foresee that the planning department, bearing in mind...
David's got an update because he met with them 2 days ago.
Oh, right, okay. If you've got an update...
Peter and I met with the planning officers last week. When we discussed it, their view was that they wouldn't have any legal justification for not determining on these planning applications. Now, I'm not an expert, but it seems to be got some new advice that suggests that is actually the case, that there is a legal justification for deferring it until the neighbour plans.
I've got at least 2 case studies that show that the nearer you get to the end point, the more weight that the council should be.
Well, that very much needs to be made forcibly, representation then. But when we met with the officers only last week, they expressly said that they felt they had to determine it within the first few weeks, and that they wouldn't be able to.
That's why they'll justify it for 13 weeks. So, come the middle of October, those 2 applications will come to my committee.
So, what we've got, you see, is obviously we've now got this information in regard to that, and I think we should actually put it on a separate letter from Town Council Working Party in regard to Mr. Watts. I can never remember your surname. I do. Yeah, I'm terrible with names. And put that in to our letter, because it is very powerful, and it actually points to the fact that we can actually stop this in its tracks for the time being, because by the time October comes, we'll be well into examination.
The framework's very clear.
Yeah, so if we can do that as a separate document and with David's document, I think that would actually act as a more powerful two-pronged attack.
If
you have case studies, Julian,
I've sent out the things.
So once again, I say that there's massive ammunition here that we have to really collate effectively. Do you want me to draw?
Yeah, I think we should. I mean, and maybe if we can, just sort of, what's the date? It's the 3rd. We can meet maybe by the 10th or the 11th, so we can get it in before the 12th. As a separate document.
I would certainly like to say that the council are fighting this like nobody's business.
I think you've got to know.
Absolutely. I'd like the residents to know that.
There's
It
change.
may well be we'll lose, but we're in the boxing ring here, and we've got our gloves off.
So can I, before we go on, because I'm going as well, Tony, you're off on holiday, aren't you, on the 11th?
I'm sure she does.
So can we do it before you go?
Yep.
When do you go?
Friday. Friday.
Right, so should we do it Thursday?
Yeah.
Are you all right for Thursday? Doesn't matter, we can make it any time.
Any time after 5.
Yeah, that's fine. William? Can you make it after 5 on Thursday?
This Thursday?
Yeah. Right, so we'll get it done then. Jerry?
I might not be able to make that. I'm not sure.
Sorry?
I might not be able to make that, Peter. I'll need to check with Claire.
All right, well, if you can, it'd be great. And Phil? Great. That's Thursday after 5 o'clock. Okay, let's say 6 o'clock here. Is that okay? All smashing? Right, good night.
May I just thank members of the council who are not on the planning committee for turning up.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Can I just say to the town council, thank you very much for the neighbourhood plan. I have read to Tom first well, but he asked and told me he was totally unacceptable, but you were representing us doing hard work, and then the East Northampton override.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm talking to you about the last
That sounds sweet.
to get some positive.
Where are you going
No, that's fine.
Thank you, David. That was such a... He did brilliantly, didn't he? You saved us about 5 hours.
Can I suggest that we have a conversation outside the room so we can get finished? Good night.
Right, let's crack on.
Let's go.
Come on. Crack on.
Right.
What's on regardless?
Hang on. Today.
David.
David.
Thank you.
And of course.
Right.
I got to ask a waterfall man, he was talking so much.
I know how to...
Right. We need to move on because there are 3 more planning applications to look at and other items on the
There's
agenda.
nothing hugely interesting in the next bit.
No, they were waiting to see the red kite thing, but it's not on the agenda.
No,
No, it's not specifically, no.
I did tell the gentleman the other day that we've not had anything.
We've not had anything yet.
But it will,
You can go.
when it happens,
Yeah.
it will be...
Yeah. And you'll be welcome to
I'm
come.
going to let you know.
Thanks very much.
Simply, I don't want to waste your time.
Thank you very much indeed, much appreciated.
Take care.
Take care.
And you'll probably get the same answer that you tell us tonight, so...
Right.
Right. Well, after the excitement,
After the thrill,
we now come back to something marginally more mundane, which is at 90 West Street, a listed building consent for an internal single door widening and the introduction of a balanced flue to an external
there
window.
it is.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
It's frustrated, the work's been done, I rang Lloyd Mills, and he hasn't got any issues.
No problem.
So, are we
Yeah, happy.
fairly happy with that?
On the basis that Lloyd Mills is, we already know his view, there seems little point in saying we'll defer to the view of the Conservation Officer because we just heard it. Having said that, it is a
Well, yeah, but in
retrospective.
fairness, that was just a telephone call, so it wasn't the right thing.
Well, perhaps what we should do is indicate that we have no objections subject to the views of the Conservation Officer, other than to make our usual observation that retrospective planning applications are to be deplored.
I was just about to say that. Right, okay. But that's that one.
Now we move on to 63 Gordon Road and a 2-storey rear extension.
Right, okay. The first thing that's that's it's where it is, and the houses in Gordon Road have got really quite long back gardens.
Yes.
And quite a lot of them have done something very similar to this. Okay. because I've done a few of them. The proposal is to stick that there. I don't have anything more to say about it, really.
They've started work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That leads down to the park, doesn't it?
Yeah, that garden goes on to the park.
Yeah.
They've already started.
Well, if work has started, we will contact ENC, point out that work has apparently started before a decision has been taken, and perhaps their enforcement officers will cause the work to stop pending determination. Because that has to be the approach.
In my opinion, it's significant.
Leaving aside the issue of whether or not they should have started, which clearly they shouldn't, there seems to be plenty of space. It seems unlikely that it's going to cause any particular issues to any neighbours, and no doubt, subject to the usual caveat, I suspect.
I have not got any complaints.
There are no objections that we're aware of at this point.
In modern houses, we've dreamed of that now,
and given our sometimes issues around impact on car parking, it isn't going to have any. So there doesn't seem to be a basis for objecting.
And that's the recreation ground, isn't it?
Yes, that's the
side, so it's quite open aspect.
It's very open.
It's open aspect.
And many of those houses have already had work.
Can I just endorse that? I know that because I've dealt with probably about 4 or 5 of these down there.
They got a bonus when they were council houses originally, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were.
But
They were
brought back.
originally. They were sold under Margaret Thatcher's right to buy.
They did well together.
Right.
Next.
Handle Rugby Club.
Handle Rugby Football
Club.
Club.
I'll put the elevation, just in case you're interested.
It's quite high.
It is.
But
Well, then it is a 2-storey extension, so you'd expect it to be at the same level as the rest of it, really.
Well, it's... But I think its position is the most important thing, if you go back to that. Really, I mean, it's...
Right, let's move on.
Deal. Next.
Handle Rugby Football Club. Now, there is a bit of... just before we actually start looking too much at it, we have, of course, all had to declare an interest because it is on Occupation Road. One of the issues that does arise is that we found out about the planning application and then said to the rugby club, would it have been rather nice if you'd spoken to us, please? As I've understood it, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, their view was, oh well, we'll try and get the permission first, and then once we've got the permission, we'll tell you that we've applied for it, which is really the wrong way round. And I think they should be reminded, whatever else, that actually they have to come to us and ask for permission before they start applying for planning permission to do anything.
You need their wrist slapped again because they started building in there as well.
Oh.
There's builders in there.
They've been refurbing the inside.
It may be that if we're talking about the builders being in to do internal works, that's a slightly different issue to doing what is proposed here, but we might want ENC to keep an eye on it, that work is not commencing on this prior to any determination of the application, let's put it that way. So the application is for a single-storey rear extension to the clubhouse, PVC cladding of existing brick facades, the painting of exterior doors, and fenestration to match cladding colour.
Well, basically, I just got a bit of a hump about this because they really should have.
They've been cheeky.
They've been very cheeky.
They did
By
the same with the dugout.
This is the 3rd time they've done this.
They know perfectly well too.
Yeah,
They know what the limits
This
are.
is the 3rd time because they're building it on a concrete bit that they erected and didn't tell anybody. Because I went up there and I actually had a terrible row with a bloke. I went up there to actually photograph the boardwalk.
Oh, yes.
I went up there to photograph the boardwalk and they parked under a tree. And an extremely nasty individual come zooming on me and told me that I was parking in the wrong place. Now, there were only 4 cars in the bloody car park, but he chose to shoot over to me and have a right go at me. So then I got my camera out and took a photograph of him and he kicked my car.
That was a bit silly.
It's just, look, I'm a rugby player. I love the game, right? And that is not what rugby players should do. Full stop. Very bad. By the way, I've still got this photograph.
Perhaps we should get back to the planning application.
Yes. No, I don't have to. There it is. It's sitting on the
Where
top.
did the slap wrist again?
You can see it.
Because I've got a feeling it's sneakily doing the other bits.
Basically, look, they're just extending it a bit. And look, come on. It's
When they got promoted to the higher grade, they were talking about doing it then.
Yep, absolutely. And now look, it's the end of occupation roads. It's on property that we are responsible for looking after on behalf of our residents. It's not exactly in an area of natural beauty, but, you know, it's a bit difficult to go any further, really. Let me just see if I can.
No.
There it is. That's the proposed extension.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just on the end.
Does anybody have an objection?
No, apart from the fact that they should be wrapped on the knuckles.
Yes. Well, we're going to do this in two ways. We'll write to ENC Planning and just ask them to make sure that no work has started on this prior to the determination of the application. But as landlords, I think we should probably be saying to the Estates Committee that they should be chasing up our tenant and pointing out that there is an order in which these things are supposed to be done. And it's not the first time that we've had to pull them up about it, and we would not regard it as acceptable for it to happen again.
If they're improving a building on our land, we should increase their rent.
I was just going to say.
You're ahead of me, but the other thing is, don't forget, we are considering building a place for our people to keep our grass machinery and stuff up there, so that we can escape from the cost of that one. The other thing is, we're going to have to have some facility to get to the boardwalk, which has got to need some substantial amount of this, that and the other. Now, we've gone through all that in public and whatever. I don't think this is particularly bothersome in terms of, it's not bothersome really, but it just knocked me that they haven't actually talked to us.
But we should remember as we go through these applications around this area that it is going to change. With the new boardwalk, what's going to cost, whatever it's going to cost, will be almost like if it comes over like the plan, it's going to be quite a beautiful thing, and there will be more people going there.
Yep.
So we have to remember that as it gets more and more popular, it becomes more. It becomes onerous on us to actually make it and keep it in a good condition.
Agreed.
Right.
As long as they don't add any other bits on.
I think
the rent goes up accordingly.
Unfortunately, it's not that simple with the way that this is written. But anyway, I think that determines that application. Bearing in mind that there are still items on this agenda, shall we move on? Planning outcomes, well, they're all there. The one I would draw your attention to is that the one to which we objected, that is the 3 new dwellings off Pexley Court. That application has actually been withdrawn.
Was that the one 68 East Road?
No.
Bexley Court.
Bexley Court, off Bennefield Road.
It's got a hell of a lot of trees in there.
Yeah, amongst other things. Now, I shall take opinion. It is 5 to 9. We have got one further significant item on the agenda, which is to look at a whole string of documents. Now, it may well be that this wouldn't take us very long. Equally, if it's going to take a long time, it may be that councillors would prefer to defer it.
Yes, please.
One for deferring it.
The only thing is, I would suggest that what you were saying about the planning guidance document helping us now, I think defer it, but I actually don't think there's a lot to happen because it's saved us now. And if we're using it now without any issues, I think we should just redo it.
Well, there is a revised version of it, which I think hopefully was in your pack.
Yeah.
It is very much, it's very similar. One of the key things that changed was actually to do with our wish list as a council, because we changed that wish list years and years ago to remove, for example, the Relief Road and the construction of a sports centre. And then you look at this document and see that they were both still referred to in it. So they've disappeared in version 2 and so on. And it's been updated to reflect the fact that the neighbourhood plan is where it now is. But there's not a massive amount in it.
Because we can do it in 10 minutes next time.
It shouldn't take very long, and unless we have an extraordinary sort of raft of planning applications on the next occasion. I would like to think that we could finish the next meeting by 9 o'clock, whereas this one could go on till 9:30 if we go through these documents tonight. Would we be happy to defer?
I'm very happy.
Yeah, very happy.
I'm actually quite happy with the content anyway, having read it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I went through this in considerable detail some time ago, and as far as I'm concerned, I just, at the moment, just say I agree with all of it.
Well, we'll look at it next time, but that might suggest that if that's going to be a common reaction, it may not take us all that long to do, but perhaps we should pass that one. We'll defer it to the next meeting. I don't think we've got anything else specific lined up for that next meeting that I can think of. Subject to any planning applications that come in.
Deferring it doesn't stop us using the existing
It certainly doesn't stop us using the existing guidance document because it exists in its current form and listen until it's revised. Two of the other documents, the response guidance document and the retrospective planning application document, already exist. They're just there because we've tried to pull everything together so that you can see what there is, and then after the discussions we'd had, there are some new policies. The policy on illuminated signs in the conservation area is actually simply lifted out of that document anyway. It's only restating that. So the only new things, completely new, are to do with graffiti, A-boards and fly posting. And we may want to spend a few minutes on certain aspects of that. Working on that assumption, I'll start over here. Any other matters of a planning nature to report?
No.
Just one thing, very quickly, because you asked me to follow through the playground, Hillfield Road, and the residents are forming a group. A teacher at Oundle School, I don't know his name, has said that he thinks it's not, it wouldn't pass health and safety regarding, is it a Child Health and Safety Act?
No, not specifically that I'm aware of.
Anyway, he was going to check out with someone at the school regarding the playground. But it's the other playgrounds that the Persimmon Charles Church have put in. They've put a fence round, which this one I believe needs a fence round. So I'm just in contact of pursuing that. Also, there's a question of there's rats there and
we don't met rats and mosquitoes.
So there's a lot of issues that the residents have picked up. It's just, that's ongoing, okay?
That's fine.
Just a quick query about, the Turkish barbers.
Yeah.
I've got an update on that.
Do you want to give it, because it's all the stickers. Because remember the issues with the ambulance thing, we had to get the stickers right.
I've contacted enforcement and they've contacted them. They said they've given them 28 days to standardise, I think they said, their advertising at the front and to remove the barber's pole.
That's right.
So they're going to keep me
And
updated.
they haven't got change of use, have they? So I hear.
He didn't say anything about that in enforcement. So.
Oh, well, that is what I was told. That they had. I was told
Should apply for change of use,
They had
Maybe we can follow that up.
applied for change of use.
It's nice to have one here.
It's not yet come forward as a formal planning application.
No, nothing else,
What's this list that's on the agenda?
Oh, that's me. That was my update. I'll go at the end. Just an update about
I've got something I want to
Greedy Piglet and the RSPCA. They're still on the planning enforcement's list, the Greedy Piglet, apparently there's some issues with their application, so it's been delayed, but they're chasing them. And with the RSPCA, as we all know, it looks like that's all just been put on hold, so they've stopped all work on it at the moment.
Because they're contravening their own rules about how close they are to their next outlet.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough.
Was that your comment, or is there another one?
Well, I've been approached by the two ladies in the bookshop who are having tremendous problem parking now when they come into Elm to come to work. And I mean, I admire them really, because they absolutely don't want to contravene the 2-hour parking in the council car park behind the co-op. And they've been parking in the long stay. But unfortunately, although I know that we've been talking to Fairline, it hasn't made any difference. And they've got used to coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning in order to park, to go and work in the bookshop at 9 o'clock in order to secure parking. And there are people now already filling those places because they challenged them, these men, and they said there's a new shift pattern at Fairline, and I think they've changed their day. They're starting very early and then going home at 3 o'clock or something. And we really have got to look at this, because where are people going to park?
I know.
So I got an email back from Fairline 19th of August, because I chased them up to
Yes, I know, yeah.
He says that he's not yet, he's waiting for a decision on the planning application. As well,
What difference is that going to make?
Well, because they've got some site changes going on, and additional parking on their site is part of the plan. They're going to have the other one is the access road to the end of it, which is what we asked for.
Right.
So anyway, it says waiting for decision on the planning application, which I understood has been approved, but I've not yet seen written confirmation. I'll be happy to have a meeting with you at the site, with you and Jerry. So he gave a couple of dates, but we couldn't make those two. But anyway, we're with them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the good thing is about the tone of response from him. You know, he was extremely supportive of what we wanted to do. Yeah. It's just that we let our half the ball with it, and that it all centred around his plan.
I can see World War III breaking out down there.
I know, you know, I've been there, and it's not just the parking on it, but it's the way they drive off that site when they're coming up. They're absolutely mad, you know, so you know, we need to do something.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you. So, Humphreys?
No,
it's your yes. I know you're a guest, but you are the mayor, so I think that gives you certain privileges. Can I just mention one thing in leaving? I spotted the draft agenda for the full council meeting on the 17th.
My apologies.
Which I will be here for. It might just be worth, in the context of that, looking at your planning guidance document. Arundel Council is not willing to adopt further open spaces and or play equipment on new developments due to the long-term financial impact of this upon the council. And since that is going to be one of the items on the agenda, we will have to consider whether we continue to maintain that policy or not. I leave it for you to think about. And on that note,
well done.
and shortly after 9,